Don't touch that dial.
Welcome back to the Behind the Bits podcast. I'm still Scott Curtis, and I'm glad you're here for episode 3. On episode 3, we've got Reena Calm. She is from Chicago, and she's a favorite headliner all over the country and came from the East Coast, but calls Chicago home now. She gave some great insights about improv comedy and how it helped her get into stand-up and understand her stage presence and working with the audience and all that. Great stuff that comics need to know, which is kind of unnerving for me because every time I've had the chance to do improv, I just freeze. But, that's just the way it is. With Reena, you're going to get a good understanding of life on the road and also managing your own career. She does everything on her own, books her dates, and does all the accounting and stuff that you need to do. It's pretty cool that she was on Doug Loves Movies. It's one of my favorite podcasts. If you want to catch her episode, I actually looked it up. It's episode 97, so you can go right to it. She's got a book out, available on Amazon. It's called Once Upon a Time, Legend of a Size Queen on Amazon. That's SIGHS Queen. That's on Amazon. I'll put a link to that in the show notes. It's basically a bunch of one-liner puns that have worked for her, and some of her friends who are artists put some illustrations together for that. So it looks like a really cool book. If you've come to episode 3 and you listen to the first 2 episodes, thank you. Thank you for listening, and hopefully this has given you some good information about stand-up comedy and what it's all about and what it takes to get to be a good stand-up comic. It's basically serious talk here about comedy, so it's not a lighthearted romp. There's a lot of funny stuff in it, but there's a lot of serious stuff too, and that's really the tone I'm looking for. I'm looking to talk to people about what it takes to be a comic, and I'm really looking for comics in all phases of their career, all the way from being a feature act to being somebody like Tom Dreesen, who was my first guest. Hopefully get a broad spectrum of people and a lot of stuff, and hopefully there are some good golden nuggets you can take away from it and help you along your career. Or if you just want to learn what comedy is all about and you're a comedy nerd, this podcast is for you too. I have to say that getting this podcast launched had its ups and downs, mostly downs. I set it up. I'm using Podbean, and I set up the name of it incorrectly and then submitted it to iTunes and Stitcher and all the podcasts, Google Podcasts and all those apps, and it just totally screwed things up, and uploaded a couple episodes that way, and then I had to fix it and got everything fixed except for Stitcher, and Stitcher took a long time to fix it, but finally this week they got everything fixed, so I think I'm on all the platforms. If you look for Behind the Bits on any podcast app and you don't find it, let me know and I'll figure out how to get on there, because it looks like everything went through now. It's kind of an arduous process when you're stupid enough to name your podcast the wrong thing, and I named it really bad. What I thought I typed was definitely not the name of the podcast, so nobody would have ever found it. So episode 3 is getting ready to come up. As always, if you like the podcast, rate it on whatever platform that you are listening on. If you think that you would be a good guest for the podcast, give me an email at scott@thebtbpc.com, or you can message my Facebook page. You can message my Twitter page, which is the BTBPC. I'm also on Instagram, Behind the Bits Podcast. That's all the social media I'm doing for right now. But here is episode 3, and it's Reena Calm, and I think you will like it much more than the intro. Okay, welcome back to the Behind the Bits podcast. This is Scott Curtis, your host, and with me today I've got Reena Calm from Chicago. Hey, Reena, how are you?
Hello.
thanks.
I'm great. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for being on the podcast. I'm just getting this started, and I've got comics actually saying yes, and they don't even know me. So that's nice. I appreciate that.
Well, it's pretty wild how people who love comedy will talk to anybody who will listen about
Yeah, no
comedy.
doubt. Yeah,
So
that makes
that's me.
yeah, that makes the interviews easier. I used to do a local podcast, and I interviewed people who aren't used to that, and sometimes it was hard to get people to actually say words.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, I'll try to choose mine carefully to not ramble on, but
Yeah.
this is not my problem.
Rambling is okay as long as there's content. That's cool.
Yeah, hot content.
Yeah, so I'm old, so I say I saw you a couple years ago at the drop, but it may be 4 years ago. The time goes by so quick now, but I saw you at the drop, and I think this was before I was even serious into doing stand up, and my wife and I went, and you were one of the favorites I had seen there since we had started going, and it was just a great show. So I always, I always remember the people that I like, and so that's why you're on my list to be one of my first guests, and so here we are.
Well, based on who I know you've already talked to, I am highly complimented. I know you have good taste. You have some of the same favorites. So thank you. And yeah, I mean, that's just it's a more intimate setting at the drop. So I feel like, you can actually connect with the audience at a level that you can't necessarily always do when there's, a big, huge room of people that, you hope you make an impact, but I think it's more personal there. So thank you. That means a lot to me.
Yeah, well, great.
A lot of good comics go through there. So.
Yeah, no doubt. I see some. It was the first time I saw Stuart Huff was there, and that was obviously a great show. Yeah.
Yeah.
Actually, I've seen
Stuart Huff is never just a night of comedy. That's an experience.
Yeah. So, as far as you getting started in comedy, was that early for you, or when did you start actually getting interested in doing comedy?
Well, that's it's been a kind of how early can I go back? I mean, I always kind of had like a performance bug or whatever, like when I was little, I would try to do stuff I'm the oldest, and I don't know if this is me being like a born performer or just an insufferable human being that I would always ask unsolicited, offer my services as the magician for the party and things like that.
Uh-huh.
And I don't know, maybe doing comedy is less embarrassing than being a magician. So, comedy has always been kind of a natural thing I've been drawn to, especially in high school. Really was into, I think the show Strangers with Candy was a huge deal for me.
Mm-hmm.
I was fascinated by that group. They came from Chicago, and then doing more research about them, that they came from Second City and how many people came from Second City from Saturday Night Live and all that stuff. So I didn't really know anything about Chicago, but I just kind of decided that was where I needed to go to pursue whatever I was going to do in comedy.
Right.
And so I moved to Chicago with the vague goal of comedy with not really a plan. When I was 21, and then didn't get to go to college there. I was supposed to go to Columbia College in Chicago, and that fell through, but I just kind of decided to go. I couldn't, the financial aid got all weird and stuff. I guess, yeah. My dad said he never filled out this paperwork. It was his taxes. Anyway, long story short is that I couldn't go, and decided to go anyway. Even though I wasn't going to be able to go to school there, I decided just to go to Chicago because I wasn't doing much better else. And the first year I lived there, I ended up getting a job at Second City just as a server working on the night staff, and started taking classes there for improv. And yeah, I did improv for a long time, a few years at least, before I kind of, I don't know, being 21 in Chicago and jumping into any comedy scene, but particularly improv at that time was definitely just, let's call it being 21, but it was a lot of drinking and, real life comes at you fast. So I feel like I took a few years off somewhere. Like I did improv for probably like maybe 4 years, 5 years, and then, took a little bit of a break to try to be a real person, and that didn't stick. So, tried to do regular stuff, regular jobs, drinking for no reason, and that didn't really work out. So I ended up, after like a little bit of a hiatus, probably like a year or two of not doing anything, decided to get back into improv classes. And that round of doing improv is where I met, David Drake, who's a hilarious comedian based out of New York now. And him and he convinced me. It wasn't even like something that I was easily about to do, but the bar that I worked at had a room that would have been great for an open mic, he said. And so he convinced me to start doing an open mic for stand-up in the back of this bar that I worked at Will's Northwoods Inn. And that mic's still going. I hosted it for about 8 years. And that was kind of how I started stand-up, was really just our first night of, I didn't even do an open mic before we started our open mic. Like I'd gone to a couple of them and I still wasn't convinced that it was for me. Yeah. But I figured I would just dive off into the deep end with hosting. And we just got really lucky with timing when we started the mic. He was really smart about the need for a good Sunday mic at that time because one had just canceled, or one had just ended rather. And it was actually really funny because I was nobody then in the stand-up world, but because of when we started the mic, it got very popular. And there was like a group of kind of scene veterans that were starting their, like young scene veterans that were starting their own Sunday mic. It was like 8 comics that everybody liked that were starting a mic, and they called it Sunday Swagger. And it's very funny that they did because nobody showed up. Everybody was at my mic. And even like the people running Sunday Swagger were coming to my mic. And so their mic did not last more than like a month. And ours just became really busy. Three Dead Moose is the name of the open mic. It's still going every Sunday in Chicago. And it's not as busy as it used to be, but that's probably more reasonable. Nobody really wants to wait. I mean, Cole's is like the biggest open mic in Chicago. Cole's has been going a little bit. I think Cole started like a year or two before ours started, and that's had like different hosts over the years. But that mic is like legendary and always gets like 60 people signing up every Wednesday. So ours was like that for a minute, but it's definitely more in like the 20, 30 comic every Sunday range, which is, I think, more reasonable. But yeah, check it out if you're ever in Chicago.
That's a really good story. So doing improv, it's one of the things that's been on my mind. Do you feel like that really helped you with doing stand-up, or did it help you with just stage presence? Or
yeah, majorly helpful. Like it was, I still think that some of my best writing happens when I'm on stage. Not, it's hard to control that, but, those instincts kick in when you're up there to say something funny. And I think that's something that I got from doing improv is like, trying to be in the moment. I mean, my favorite comedians are in the moment. You feel like you're really connecting to a moment and not just like, I mean, I love hearing good jokes, but like you want to be a part of the moment, And improv has really helped me with not just trying to be in the moment and being able to handle unexpected things that come up when you're on stage, but even though I'm still not much of a crowd work comic, I mean, I can deal with a heckler, but my strategy is just kind of like, well, maybe if we're nice to them, they'll stop. Like I'm not really the type to be like, well, you're ugly too, that's
right?
Not,
yeah.
I don't think that helps anything really. I mean, I've kind of entered a weird philosophy, I guess, about doing comedy in general, and I like to have a good time like anybody else, and roasts are hilarious, things like that. But I personally don't really like. I want to find a way to do comedy that makes people laugh, but also like makes them feel good and not walk away being like, "Oh, that was brutal."
Yeah.
or if I'm going to be brutal about something, I want it to be something that's like
Right.
something we all feel a certain way about, like a common enemy, not making light of anybody that's, I don't know.
Right.
You know what I mean.
And I think there's
Punching
definitely,
down is the term often used.
yeah, I think there's definitely a place for that brutal comedy, and I feel like I need it sometimes. But if you're not comfortable doing it, if you feel bad when you're done, then I could just see that eating at you and just, you know, making you feel like a terrible person. So I'm with you.
Yeah,
I
I
can't.
think some audience members want it. You know, I feel like some audience members want you to like mess with them. There's certain comics that you know if you're going to see, like, you know, that's going to happen. You know, like they're going to mess with the crowd and stuff like that. And is it like George Wallace would do the Yo Mama joke? You know, right?
Yeah.
Like everybody, his audience members would come to the show hoping to hear like the best way that he could insult their mother. You know?
Right. Yeah.
Like, that's like what he's known for. So yeah, like it's very fun. I'm not criticizing anybody that is able to be like very funny and mean. I think I worry that I would be more mean and less funny. I would say the one thing that's like, oh, that was not cool. You know, like,
you're the one to step over the line.
Yeah, and I've just learned that, you know, the point is to try to be funny always, and obviously, like, you know, tragedy is one of the greatest sources for any comedy. Tragedy plus time, the whole equation. But I also know from experience that, you know, you couldn't possibly predict like the part of your set that's gonna upset somebody. You know, so even if I'm trying to, I forget what it was. Somebody was talking about like Highlights magazine something or other, and somebody got upset about that once. It's like, okay, well, that's the most innocent reference you could ever make.
Right.
Talking about like Highlights magazine, like that was that comic that I forget. Wasn't that Big J Okerson said like, you don't know that you got like touched in the dentist office or something like that. You know, I don't know. I feel bad throwing that quote out there because that might not even be accurate. I'm just the lady that says people's names and things that I've randomly picked up in time. But yeah, I think that was him. Yeah.
Yeah, the reason...
I think that's on his degenerate special.
Yeah, the reason I asked about the improv is because I personally don't have any problem getting up and doing stand-up, but for some reason I've had the opportunity to be part of shows that were part stand-up and part improv, and they always invite me to do the improv, and I just freeze. And I don't have anything to add, and it just scares me. I love improv, but actually doing it for me, for some reason, it's my Achilles heel.
It's definitely, I mean, so one thing that I feel like I've really taken from improv when it comes to my writing is this idea that Susan Messing was one of my favorite teachers and like a Chicago legend. And she always teaches, you know, to follow the fear. And, you know, that's not saying like, oh, you hate improv, get up there and do it more. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, oh, that doesn't feel natural for you? Well, you're just not doing it enough.
Right.
Like, maybe it's not for you. You know, that's fine. Not everybody has the same strengths or inclinations. And if anything, I mean, especially talking about writing comedy, there's not a right way to do this. You know, there's plenty of wrong ways, you know, but there's not like a system that works for everybody. And you'd be amazed at some people's systems and what works for certain people. You know, there's some people that seem really off the cuff and like just very casual that really do write out every word of what they're doing. And there's other people that seem meticulous and don't write anything at all, you know? So, and when I say don't write anything at all, I just mean like actually writing out their bit.
Right.
You know, keeping like little, like that's my style really. I'm not saying, I guess my style is a little bit more meticulous when it comes to like the phrasing and the puns and the wordplay, like, and as the sets get longer, there's more going on as far as like callbacks and like when you plant seeds for things you're going to reveal later. So, and that way, I guess it is a little bit meticulous, but I think my improv stuff keeps it a little bit more, you know, open-ended.
Right.
Like I have a plan, and it's a pretty strict plan, but it's going to go wherever it goes.
Mhm.
You know?
Right. And I think I'm kind of on your side with that, because I feel when I write something, I feel like I have to write it all out longhand exactly the way I want to say it. And then I can look at it, and if it sucks, then if it sucks when I'm reading it, then I know it's going to suck when I say it. So I can change it, cut out the fluff and all that kind of stuff. But everything I've done, at least once, I've written it completely out, and then you just take it down to bullet points, and then you just remember it.
It's strange to me how many of my bits have been programmed like word for word in my head that I've never written out. I used to write them out all the way, and I do sometimes still. And I wish, honestly, my lifestyle right now, if there's anything I want to do more of in comedy, it's writing.
Mm-hmm.
I'm doing so many shows, and it's awesome. And I'm on the road, so I'm constantly just trying to book myself to. Right now, I'm just trying to save up as much as I can to deal with some legal fees, because touring isn't always glamorous.
Yeah.
And things like that. So right now my focus is kind of like, I feel like a real road runner as far as like, I would love, like, I have actually a couple weeks coming up here that I'm really excited to have a few days off to like force myself to do some of the writing, because without coming up with new bits and writing new bits, it's like, what's the point of living? What's the point of doing this at all? I mean, getting your bits good enough to take on the road, or good enough I want all of my bits to be good enough to open or close with, like, I don't want anything that's like downtime, but I mean, that you have to play with levels and stuff like that too. And
right.
I've noticed that my comedy can be a little bit exhausting on the crowd, of like, I need to make sure I'm putting in a little bit of like downtime, because my writing style in an ideal form is going to be just one joke after another.
Yeah, you are. You are very punchy. Yeah, I mean, they count laughs per minute. I think yours is probably up there on the high side, because I mean, you just go right into the next one, and I don't know if it's exhausting, but it's definitely, you have to pay attention.
Well, first of all, I just want to say that right now what I have is the feeling of like needing to, not really, but emotionally, like throw up because my heart came. If that makes sense from what you just said to me. So Thank you very much. Wow, I need to readjust. Thank you. I love puns, and just I love word play, and I don't like any dips in the show. I like it to keep at that energetic level, but I have noticed the difference of like the pace I can even go at, and I can definitely tell like a smart crowd from a crowd that I have to kind of like. I want to say there's a quote from Emo Phillips that really like I think about a lot. He told me after a show once to don't ever dumb yourself down for the audience. And there are audiences that I feel like don't appreciate the amount of jokes that I have packed into my set, and those are the audiences that I try to just not do dumber jokes, but just slow my delivery down to try to like get as many of them. And it's crazy how much of like a significant difference that makes. Of like, I'll still do my clever take. I don't know, the stuff about like abortion is not something I'll do everywhere, just because I am still like, trying to make a living at this and get paid and sell merch after the show. And some places it's just, I'll dip my toe in the waters. Luckily, that's the thing about having so many jokes in the act, is that I can kind of test the waters with a very innocent reference to the idea of a topic like abortion or something like that, and see how they respond to that, and then decide in that moment if I'm going to continue with that part of my act.
You can do some quick self.
I don't write a set list anymore, which is good and bad.
Yeah. The self-editing part, that that's something that I think that has to come with time, because I'm certainly not there yet. I have to do it.
That's where the improv training that comes in very helpful with the improv training, because you can make a plan you can try to plan what's going to work for each room that you're in. And, you know, I know that my style is like, I just did a show in Oxford, Mississippi, and everybody's very intelligent there. Readers love wordplay, and the response of that crowd, you know, you might have preconceived notions about Mississippi, and they're mostly accurate. But the response of that crowd was like, that's the kind of place I would love to record an album where, like, there's an audience that's sharp enough to actually even get my jokes.
Right.
And cut to a couple, like last week I did a show in Central Florida, and it went okay. Stuart Huff's somebody that's taught me how to be silly enough and throw in enough silliness that even if people aren't on board with maybe all of your ideas, they're still going to be entertained. Because he's like a scientist at that. You know, he's the best at, like, I mean, I've seen him change people, you know, with his ideas.
Yeah.
But I also have seen people who are not going to have their minds changed laugh at how silly he is, you know? So I think that's a real art to find a balance of how to say your jokes, but also be entertaining, because maybe your jokes aren't for everyone.
It's really hard to tackle. Yeah, it's really hard to tackle a tough subject in a polarizing state, or a polarizing subject, without being, you know, in your face. And if you can do it and be silly and goofy, then first of all, you may get people, like you said, changing their mind, and second off, it won't piss off the ones that aren't going to change their minds so much, you know.
I mean, I don't ever take for granted how it's almost like a weight, the responsibility that I feel in knowing how much more powerful what we do as comedians is than, I mean, it's also pointless at many turns, and, you know, there's plenty of times I've performed for 2 people or something, you know, and but I feel like that makes a difference even in that moment. You know, those 2 people. See, right now I've hit the moment of this conversation where I'm like, I don't even know how to direct everything I'm saying to keep it on track with a train of thought, because I just want to tell you everything I'm thinking at once.
Typical comic.
No. Like, okay, just back to the Central Florida show, like 2 people came up to me after the show on the way out and were like, man, like they recognized how many jokes I was saying, and like they're even like, man, you're really funny, like you had so many jokes, I don't think everybody got them. And I'm like, well, it means a lot that everybody else knew what I was doing because I also had to follow a man who just talked about how women are crazy for 45 minutes. And I think that brings me to my point of what I was going to say about how powerful what we do is, because I think we take for granted, because we're so excited at the idea of being up there and having jokes and getting laughs and all that stuff and all those aspects, that we take for granted how much what we're doing actually could have an effect on the room. And just the sheer power of being able to be a powerful public speaker in a room full of people who are possibly there with an open mind. You know, like, it's not much different than being a preacher. It's not much different than, I think about all the time about the people who are in the audience and like what brings them there, what they're doing there, and they've never been to a comedy show before. Right. And it really, I mean, comics are always thinking about how much time they have to do. Oh, you're doing 45 at that show? Okay. Or like how many jokes you have to do to fill the time. But not a lot of comics are thinking truly about that. That's not just your time. Right. You know, that's everybody in the room's time. And everybody in the room has their own universe that they're going to walk out of that room and hearing everything you said, and you don't know which parts are going to stick with them and what they're going to share with somebody else, or how it spreads. Right. Or what's going to come back to you. Somebody quotes a joke that you said that you didn't even remember. And I've had that happen a couple of times where somebody's like, oh man, early days at my open mic, there's so many awesome alternative comics that, like, alt comedy is one of my favorite things to watch when it's funny. Right. Same with improv or whatever. Same with stand-up. I hate that stand-up too. Just like straight edge or whatever you call it. Not alt. I don't know. Like club comics, I guess, is the 2 categories, right? Alt comedy and club comedy or something. I would say there's like 3. I would say there's like alt comedy, club comedy, and indie comedy, but then there's also storytelling, comedy, wordplay, whatever, one-liners. I wish there were genres like there is for music so people could really figure out what they're going to see. And
right. Yeah.
and now I'm rambling myself off of whatever point I was trying to make. But I don't think we realize how convincing we can be sometimes. And yeah, to me, I guess that's part of my whole thing of like trying to not be mean on stage too, because I'm like, oh, that could stick with somebody, you know, like everybody could laugh. I even have a joke that I do now about where I talk about, I do a lot of very intelligent humor. So sorry, this is going to go over some people's heads, but it's about balls. And I would pick out somebody in the audience, especially if there was somebody that was heckling, and call them long sack. I'd be like, what about you, long sack? And it would be like explosive laughter. Everybody would just like laugh really hard at me pointing out this. And even if that person was like heckling, and I would feel almost like righteous about it. Like this person was annoying, and now we all have the right to laugh at this person.
Right.
And now I do a joke where I point at nobody, and then I tell that story basically of the fact that, you know, a couple times I did that, and I used to get a bigger laugh. I would bring it to somebody, but then I looked at the guy, oh, long sack, the sad sack. Like I made somebody sad, and that's not the point of comedy. Like you just be sitting there feeling down. So I sacrificed the laughs I used to get just because it wasn't worth it to me to like really bum one dude out.
Right. Right.
They're wondering like, why'd you say that to me?
Yeah. That's funny. One of the first bits I wrote was about sitting on my balls and getting old and being careful when you sit down. It seems like I've heard a couple in that particular genre since then, but and that's really not even part of my act anymore. But it was one of the first things I ever wrote out.
Genre.
Yeah.
Yeah.
the ball genre.
Yeah. Parallel thought, right?
Yeah.
I guess they're parallel.
Well, you got enough enough dick jokes, so you got to have some ball jokes too, you know.
Yeah. Well, that's where I think comics get a little bit. There's ripping a joke off word for word, which is never okay. It's not all right, but then there's parallel thought is going to happen, and like that doesn't mean your joke about sitting on your own nuts is going to be, probably another joke could be better or worse, I guess. You never know. It's like, I think a lot about the Comedians in Cars episode with Jerry Seinfeld and Gary Shandling, where Jerry's asking him, how do you know when the joke is perfect and you've got the words right, like the right joke? And Gary Shandling is like, it doesn't matter. The joke doesn't matter. You're giving people, your energy. You're giving them yourself there's lots of jokes that I do remember the words of, but truly I don't remember a lot of them, and maybe that's on me, and everybody's different. People have quoted my own jokes back to me in a way that I'm like, oh man, I don't even remember that joke. That's awesome.
That's funny.
Some people, the words are important, obviously, with what I do with puns. Like, obviously, the words are, I'll scrutinize every Facebook post or Twitter, I always think really hard about my words and stuff like that. But on stage, I feel like if you focus too much about the words, you're going to lose the vibe. And that's why when it comes to like, oh, you have a joke about, I just watched like 4 comedy specials on Netflix back to back, and 3 of them, 3 in a row, like the comics were just talking about airplanes, and that's beyond hack.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like that's the hackiest example of a hack summit. But it doesn't matter. Like none of these comics. Well, okay, I wouldn't say none of them were hacked, but just like the fact that they went after that topic doesn't make them hack. It's just like, okay, like you better have a really funny story about it because we've heard it all.
Something new, and I don't know if there can be anything new. Yeah.
Well, yeah, they're still hearing a person be funny, make mouth sounds, and like entertain them. So it's like, if you're still funny to watch, then yeah, I heard other dudes talk about sitting on their nuts. Yeah, but if you're still funny to watch, like that's still a good bit, and try to be original, of course. But like, I also think like there's not enough topics for the amount of comics there are.
Right. Yeah.
Not to, no pun intended about your balls, but not for there to be any overlap.
Right. I think that pun was intended.
That was intended. Yeah, that was very intentional.
Hey, you're talking about audiences, and you're going from one side, or at least from the north to the south, and seeing a lot of different audiences. I was talking to a comic that's definitely more experienced than me, and he gave me this idea about audiences. He said that most people, when they go to a comedy show, first of all, it's the first time they've ever been to a live show, and they have been watching.
Most people, yeah.
Yeah, they've been watching Netflix specials. They've been watching YouTube, and how you react when you're in your bedroom watching. And
that's generous to assume. It's generous to assume they're even watching comedy.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
I think some people walk into that room have no idea what's about to happen.
Mm-hmm. Well, and the folks that do that have watched the specials and they're watching comics on YouTube, they're used to, you kind of chuckle to yourself when you're watching something by yourself. You don't have uproarious laughter or anything like that. And then you translate that to a comedy club. Sometimes they don't know how to act, even the ones that kind of know what comedy's about. And I thought that was interesting.
That's true, but that's also, I feel that's an excuse.
Mm-hmm.
I obviously, that's a valid excuse sometimes, where you're like, yeah, there's for sure nights that you're like, man, that audience, that was just like not a great show.
Mm-hmm.
As the group mind is so powerful. So it takes one person. I mean, I can't tell you, try this, honestly. Start a clap, somebody
Mm-hmm.
says something that you like and the audience is nobody else is clapping. Start
Mm-hmm.
clapping and see if other people don't just join you instinctively. Or the videos on the train of you see somebody laughing so hard that it makes everybody around them laugh.
Mm-hmm.
There's something about actually generating laughter. When people share laughter together, that's really I think soul healing. And yeah, I think some people don't know how to be in public, let alone a comedy show. Some people don't. It takes all kinds. I was even just thinking about, I just spent a couple days in Florida, and that's a bad example for anywhere else, but I spent a couple days in Florida, and I spent one day even just walking around the beach by myself, which is a thing that, I'm still what a beautiful time without talking to anybody. And people will come up and talk to you on the street, and just say random stuff. And I just kept noting how every single person that just said something random to me, aside from your standard good morning or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
you talk to each other. Anybody else that said anything that just felt the need, they had to share something with me, another human. They happened to. It was something very strange,
right?
Something that why are you saying that to me? Why are you saying that at all? Are you stupid? Maybe there's something wrong with me that I'm just this one woman where on this strip of sand, Pensacola Beach, it just goes all the way down, shoots through the Gulf of Mexico, just off the coast of Florida. So it's just this long, miles and miles of sand. And that's what it is. That's what I drove to. We're in the middle of a stretch of miles of sand, and she just looks at me, and the stranger walks up. She's like, this just goes on for miles and miles. It just keeps walking, and you're like, how did that register in your head as the thing you needed to say to me?
Yeah.
Yes, it does.
Yeah.
You just got to validate their experience. Yep,
It may just be too much sun.
Maybe. And now I'm just rambling, but when it comes to people not laughing loud, I think that is your responsibility as a comedian to trick them,
Mm-hmm.
because those real laughs are going to come from the elements of surprise.
Mm-hmm.
And, that's probably why I've framed my style to have so many punchlines in it, because every punchline is a moment of surprise.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's something you didn't think I was going to say. Or this is something that's going to set off excuse me, going to set off string of thoughts in your head that's going to really quickly lead to a realization that's going to make you go, oh, surprise yourself and laugh, you know? But it's that element of surprise. So you got to catch people off guard a lot of times with comedy is like the whole point of like, you know, there's so many aspects besides joke writing that are going to help with that, like stage presence, tone of voice, all those things. The way you move across the stage, the way you can literally direct people's energy with your eyeball. You know, I mean, it's so far beyond the wording of a joke that goes into the element of surprise that hits the audience in your delivery.
Right. I think it took me a good 2 years to actually look at people in my audience. I was talking above them, and I finally figured out. Nobody told me, but I finally figured out I'm really not connecting here. And when you start doing that, then I mean, even if you're not doing well, you at least are seeing what's happening, and then you can change it up when needed.
Yeah, I mean, being connected to the feeling of the room. There's nothing. I mean, yeah, obviously every comedian's goal is, or at least should be, to get great laughs. But there's also these wonderful moments when you're on stage where you could hear a pin drop that are almost even more exhilarating because you know you have like maybe even 200 people just like completely locked into your act, you know, like waiting to hear bated breath, like what is she going to say next? And yeah, obviously your goal is to say something that makes them laugh very hard after that.
Right.
But those moments when you know everybody's just like totally tuned into you are, those are just as fulfilling as the laughs can be sometimes because you're like, okay, I'm doing this. I've got this crowd like right where I need them, you know, right where I want them. I've built up this energy. This is my energy that I've built up, you know. And I think that looking at the audience is, I remember like, there's a really great tutorial on YouTube, I think, or maybe it's on Vimeo, I don't know, but Ralphie May did like a stand-up workshop.
Yeah. I actually have that saved. I haven't watched it yet, but somebody else posted that, and it looks really good. I watched a few minutes of it.
Yeah. Well, one of the things from that I really stuck with and think about is him talking about, you know, how he's telling his jokes, like where he looks, and how there's a trick and an art to making sure you're using your hands and your face and your eyeballs to get everybody like round up the whole room's attention. And you look to the right, you look to the left, you look all over, and then you shoot your punchline right down the center. And it wasn't until watching him talk about that I really, really thought about how much that can help. You know, really, it feels like sweeping up everybody's attention into a pile. You know what I mean? Like getting it right where you need it so you can deliver your joke right to the center. And also, like, I mean, I'm so flattered and complimented by the stuff you've said about my act. And obviously, comedy is an art form, so everybody's going to do it a certain way, a different way, hopefully. And everybody who likes comedy is going to like somebody else or a certain style more than others. What I like to pride myself in being able to like tune into the room's energy and connect with the crowd, but I still feel like I have learning to do in the sense of like, I mean, I would love to be better at that, you know? Like I said, I'm not like a crowd work style comic, so I don't think that's something, I would rather write more comedy that I love than work on that skill. But yeah, there's like, that's one of the most impressive things. I mean, I love a well-written act. I really do. There's some of my favorite comics are just like the most sharp and like viciously funny writers. But performers, there's nothing that beats a performance of like somebody who's just doesn't even need material. You know, like somebody who can just walk into a room, own it, and like Kristen Toomey is somebody that's amazing at that. I mean, I've watched her go up and do 20 minutes without saying a single joke and just kill the room. And Marty DeRosa is another one who's like the crowd work king of my life, but definitely Chicago. Marty DeRosa is incredible at crowd work, and yeah, they make it not look like work at all. It's like watching people like that makes anybody think to go up there and just be funny without material, but absolutely not.
Right.
You know, and they also have great material. Like, you know, they both look like Marty just had his first album come out, and Live from Parts Unknown, and Kristen, her first special coming out soon. And that's all material. It's not a crowd work album, a crowd work special, you know, but, yeah, I just think that that's, to me, like, maybe it's one of those things where the grass is always greener kind of a thing. Like, I wish I had like talent envy. I wish that I could be that powerful, funny without, you know what I mean? Like needing. One time, me and Kristen had a debate show against each other. We did arguments and grievances. And, this is a roast battle, Beef, Chicago. We did a roast battle together. And I planned for weeks, like writing anything I could think of to say about her. Like what's like, you know, mean enough to be funny, but not so mean, because that's my best friend, and blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
Just writing for weeks, trying to jot down any idea. And ultimately, and I was going over all my notes, like before the show, she saw me going over my notes. So ultimately, she kicked my ass by making fun of me for preparing.
Yeah.
She literally just made fun of me for writing jokes. And for like going over my notes. She made fun of me for that and kicked my ass.
Yeah. Did she ask for your notes or?
No, but honestly, I'll tell you what, like, and I told her this too, like, I think I made her nervous because she hadn't planned anything.
Yeah.
And so that was her like defense mechanism, was to kind of like bully me through it.
Yeah.
And, you know, I mean, she won. It worked for sure. Because like that's super powerful, you know, to be able to, you know, yeah. And maybe that's like a question of like, you know, comedy, you know, being funny is absolutely like part of the equation, but confidence is a pretty important part of the equation too. You know?
Right. There's been a lot of writers. There's been a lot of writers who aren't great performers, and a lot of performers who aren't great writers, and getting them both together, that's pretty rare.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, both of those two examples that I gave you, they both have amazing material, like enviable material, but they don't need it, which is even more, I mean, you know.
Yeah.
That's a very, on the East Coast, that's like I noticed like a lot of the comics just go forward with this like really brazen, like aggressive, like attack the room style. And even if it's not attacking, even if it's like playful ribbing, you know, like it makes you feel like you're at some like family reunion and everybody's making fun of your uncle. You know, like it makes you feel even more connected than you feel when you're just all laughing and jokes.
Right.
You know,
one of the things,
I don't think this
go ahead
helps anybody.
Yeah.
To talk about. Yeah, I mean, if you can't just make fun of people off the cuff, then go home.
Right. Yeah, no doubt. Yeah. One of the things that I've noticed, and you know, I'm not even a traveling comic, and I've just done a few shows, and I wondered if this is the same for you. Do you feel like you're always working and you're always writing, and that every part of your life you're kind of on because it may be a bit? And I kind of think of that meme that goes around with the anime guy with the butterfly in his hand, and I just think, is this a bit? Does that happen to you, where your brain's always working and trying to figure out how, you know, going to Costco on Sunday could become a bit?
I mean, I wouldn't say that. I would say there's times like, you know, I was arrested in April. And it had to be from one of two things. If you know me at all, you know, it was either a weed or a crime. It was weed. And in those moments that are like, well, this is messed up, I even told the officer while he was arresting me, like, well, I better get good material out of this. You know, like, I'm paying Oklahoma $3,500. I better get 10 good minutes out of this crap. You know? But that's not a thing that you would be like, oh, I hope I get arrested
Yeah.
for material. Or I think that you said a lot that I like connect with, but also some things that I think are disruptive in mentality.
Mm-hmm.
I think in order to be successful at anything you do, any career path or hobby, like you have to be a whole person, like a well-rounded individual with regular thoughts and irregular patterns and habits.
Yeah.
And so, no, I don't think it's especially helpful to go to Costco and hope for something funny to happen. Or like, I get the style of observational humor of trying to try to think of what's funny about a grocery store. I can respect that, and maybe going to the grocery store is a good way to generate those ideas. But I think that's putting an awful lot of pressure on your trip to Costco. I think that my writing style, and again, everybody's is different. I want to say that the hour we're chatting today, if this wasn't us chatting, I would be using this time to write comedy. That's not true. I would be on Instagram. I would be doing promo and, booking and stuff like that. I'm in a really weird phase of my tour, which has lasted since January. It's not stopping. And before that, I'm in a really weird phase of this right now. Like I said, where I'm kind of in scavenger mode of trying to deal with logistics more than writing as much as I'd like. Of all, actually, Stuart Huff so kind to talk to me about some of his best tips for generating comedy and writing and stuff like that, especially when you're trying to go after topics that matter to you. Like, how do you go about that? Do you all of a sudden, for him, for example, he's got a brilliant hour about the Constitution. So I asked him, now, do you go in, do you just have these amazingly funny thoughts about the Constitution and write an hour around it? Or do you say, I want to make the Constitution funny. I want to go in and talk about this and try to write jokes around it. And, he gave me some really helpful ideas that, he, as a disclaimer, said first, this is something that works for me, but that doesn't mean at all that it'll work for you.
Right.
And, things like that are ideas that I don't want to be repetitive. I would say suggest one to his episode of your podcast for those insights. But
the Constitution bit actually came up when we talked, and the funny thing is one of the first times he was trying to flesh that out was in South Bend, and I was there. I got to see him go through that.
A bit more of an hour. The Constitution hour.
Yeah, he had maybe 10 minutes at that point, and and it's funny because he said he hated it. He hated it at that time, and he didn't know if he was going to go through with it, and then he just kept doing it, and now he's trying to get an hour out of it.
I'll tell you what, he's got the hour, and I'll tell you what real quick about him is that every single time I've seen him perform live, after the show, he says, or before the show, before he starts, he said he was working on another hour, but he didn't like where it was going, so he threw it out, and now he's doing this, and it goes well. And then he just blows your whole mind. How brilliant his comedy is. He's somebody that I think really hard about. I've told him this, but also he's shut up about how much he's inspired me to do comedy the way that I'm doing it. And I understand he's been super supportive of me above and beyond, but also anybody's hesitation to say, oh, you like this, what I'm doing, you should do it too, knowing what that means.
Yeah.
People see me touring and stuff like that, and oh, I want to do that too. And it's you don't know what it is. And I think that my journey is very different than his, and anybody's journey is unique. But when it comes to that, back to the writing thing about trying to go into places, if you're always on, that particular statement is what I don't like. The idea of being always on, because I think that one of the tricks that I've had to learn more and more, the busier that I've gotten with comedy, need to compartmentalize certain parts of your life to ensure that you're still tending to every aspect in a healthy way. There's stuff in my life that's, been neglected, like my health and things like that, and my taxes. There's stuff that, all those things are important, even if they're not. And they're all part of pursuing whatever dream you're doing. You have to take care of life stuff. So I think for me, especially when you talk about going to Costco, trying to come up with trying to come up with material at any given time is like, no, for me, honestly, my last couple of years in Chicago, after comedy shows, I don't really drink much anymore. And I also have kind of, maybe because you're a little bit older, I don't know if you can sympathize with this, but like, I need like alone time.
Yeah.
I don't need to be out and like sitting around I love doing it sometimes. I just had some really great comedy chats in Florida.
Mm-hmm.
Like I, in Chicago, got to a point of like, okay, well, the show's done. I can leave. I'm going to.
Yeah.
I'm going home.
Yeah.
And I always would feel a little bit disturbed by the people that seem to just like not want to go home.
Yeah.
You know, like just keep going, keep talking, keep doing this thing. When you say go to the grocery store and think of this, it makes me think of when I would be done with my shows, I would just walk around the grocery store in Chicago. I would just go grocery shopping at like, midnight.
Mm-hmm.
And just walk around Jewel for like an hour.
Yeah.
And I don't think I was thinking about much of anything. I mean, I might have been, messaging people or, doing whatever else, but really just kind of clearing my head. I don't know. Like I said, I'm saying this from the position of somebody that wishes they wrote more. So it's also like kind of like, well, that would be a good time to try to write comedy bits.
Yeah. That question actually...
My style,
That question actually came, I was watching this video, a guy's a golf pro that has a podcast, and he had Nate Bargatze on his podcast, and he'd video part of it. And Bargatze said the only time he feels at peace is when he's on the golf course, because he's always feels like he has to be writing when he's not golfing. That's the only time he can focus on something. That's kind of where that question came from. And I kind of saw that a little bit in myself. And like I go to bed and I go over my whole day, and I think, okay, what's funny, and think about what I could make a bit out of.
Oh, I mean, like I've been really working on, I think my mind is never, still.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that I wake up like with this constant, like, I don't know if anxiety is the right word to describe it, but just this like to-do list that floods in every morning of like, and I go to bed with that too, of like, I feel like every night and every morning I'm kind of going to bed and waking up just with like all the thoughts of things that I didn't do yet or have to do, or people I have to message, or, like all these things, because I don't have a manager or an agent, I book myself all my gigs. So there's so many aspects that I feel like are always keeping me from being able to just focus on writing, which sounds like an absolute fantasy right now. But that being said, like, I've always kind of thought of writing for my style, and me talking to Stuart and trying to focus more about like how I could actually execute like writing time better, like actually trying to sit down or whatever and come up with stuff. Which I don't do really at all. I don't want to even admit how little I spend time writing. My thing is kind of like that Mitch Hedberg joke of like, if I think of something funny, I write it down. And if I can't find a pen, I just have to convince myself it wasn't that funny.
Yeah.
And so I always find a pen is the thing. I will find a way to write it down, but the funny thought comes to me, so if something's funny, you just have to try to like write it down, or I don't know. It'll be like I'll be talking to my brother or something, and I have a joke that I do now about our grandmother that came out just because we were chatting and it made him laugh, and I was like, is that just funny to you, or is that funny to everybody? And it's funny to everybody, so there's very few times, but it has happened. Like I said, I get a lot of my best lines when I am on stage and in the moment, but there's been a few jokes and I felt really accomplished. Like the first time this happened, I was on like 2-hour drive to do 5 minutes opening for Ari Spears at the Improv in Schaumburg. And I spent more time looking for parking every night of that weekend than I did on stage.
Yeah.
And Ari Spears' crowd is not my crowd, and Ari Spears' comedy is not my comedy. Do not care for it. And I don't care if he ever hears that.
Yeah.
He won't. It was one of those things like every time I listened, I was like, oh my God, it's worse than last time.
Right.
But it kills. He sells out, and people are like, "Oh my God, he was on Mad TV 10 years ago. That's awesome," or 20 years ago. So he's so funny. He's not.
Yeah.
Anyway,
he's my next guest, by the way.
I'm kidding. No,
I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
No, he didn't talk to me either. I heard he doesn't talk to people because he's worried everybody's going to try to kiss his ass. And I'm like, that's not a concern.
Yeah.
Anyway, sorry. I heard he's been rude to other people that he's worked with. So I'm sure that anybody who's worked with him will be like, sure. And then other people will be like, I'm tweeting Harry Spears about this bitch from Chicago. Anyway, it was like a 2-hour drive to get there. And on the way there, I thought of a joke and it made me laugh, like the thought of it in the car. And I was also pretty new then. I was only like, 4 or 5 years in. And I still think I was pretty new, but I remember thinking, like, to do that just tonight, it's like the improv, like, I gotta play the hits, And, but I did it anyway, and it killed, and I still tell that joke, and it's my best-selling merch comes from that joke. It's embarrassing to admit. But my point is that, like, every now and then, after a while, you'll get ideas that you just know are funny. You don't need to like write and flush them out and try them in front of a crowd. You're like, those are just incredible. When you have an idea that you're like, this will work.
Right.
And then you try it on stage that night and it does. It works. And I love trying stuff that fails too, because that's part of this. But
right.
In those cases, when it comes to like jotting down stuff that's funny, it's like I could never have like sat down and come up with that. It's just like something that occurred to me. And that's like my best stuff. It's just stuff that occurs whenever it occurs. Often on stage.
Yeah, no doubt. Hey, I know that we've been on for a while, and I want you to be able to get back to your life. I do like to do like at least one nuts and bolts things. One of the things I've noticed, because I go to a lot of open mics, is I see people do, they'll do 3 open mics and they're talking to me and they say, I got to get a good 20 minutes. I got to get my good 20 minutes. And I always back up and say, you really need to get a good 5 minutes first, because you're going to get that and then you're going to hate it. Then you're going to rewrite it and you're going to change it. How long, just so comics have a point of reference, how long would you say it took you to get that first really good 20 minutes?
Oh man, I honestly, I can remember I was doing a show with Kristen Toomey. My first time at the Drop was opening for her too. And we were doing a show where she was headlining, and 6 minutes, hour even of material at that time. But again, she's not the kind of person that even needs to do all the jokes. She can crowd work the way through a lot of times. So for her, it's less concerning than somebody like me who's there to be 20 minutes. Okay, well then that's 20 minutes of straight jokes. Like it's going to be 20 full minutes of pretty tightly packed jokes. And so I remember we were on our way to do a show in, I think, the Quad Cities, and I was going over my notes, and she just like kind of gave me shit in the car, was like, you could do 20 with your eyes shut. And I think some people are a little too eager to like have their 20. I think I'm a little bit the opposite of like, I'm a perfectionist. Like right now, if I were to like lay out all of my material, I would probably guess that I have somewhere around like, I don't know, maybe 90 minutes of stuff that I like, but I never do more than like 45, 50, an hour sometimes. Usually it's more like 45 or 50. I finally broke an hour last year, but I remember like until that I kept like looking at my clock and it'd be like 58, 59 and never quite hit an hour. But anyway, so I'm not the type of person you're ever gonna probably hear, oh, she went for 3 hours. No. Harry Spears, yes. But and for that I admire him. But
yeah.
You're never gonna hear, I mean, I'm not the kind of person that I like to always leave them wanting more, right? So anyway, my first 20, that I just want to say that was like, I always try to have goals in comedy that I can see through without any outsiders. Like, you can set goals of like, oh, I want to play this room, that room, but that requires those people to book you, like that, or I want to get on a late night. Good luck. You can do it. It's not an impossible goal, but you have less control over that than something like that you can control. Like for me, getting to 20 was like my goal one year. I'm like, I just want to get a good 20. Now, if I could remember what year that was, this would be a better answer.
Yeah.
But I would say that was probably like 4 years in.
Yeah.
Or 3 or 4 years in. Because I think my first year, I didn't take it seriously at all. I was just trying to get 4 minutes at a time for open mic. And I did get booked to do an 8-minute set before the end of my first year. I remember my first set was, and then, I think I was working on like 10-minute sets and like working up to doing like 15-minute sets here and there at like the Laugh Factory and things like that. And then, I would say that probably like my 3 or 4 year goal was probably just to get a really solid 20. And then once I hit 20, my next year's goal was to get a solid 30. And then after that was 45. And I'm not trying to hit a goal past an hour. So once I hit an hour, I made my goal trying to do all 50 states. I looked down and realized I'd already done like 30 something of them. So, now that's my goal. And to finish that, it's going to take a little while longer. So right now I'm trying to break my brain on coming up with like whatever I think a tight 5-minute set would be to do, like submitting for late night stuff, which is a weird way to think about comedy when you're trying to work on doing an hour. I'm also trying to figure out like what my album would be if I could record an album. So for when I record an album, I should say, I don't know what it'll be. I have those things kind of on the back burner right now, and they're completely opposite ways of like trying to craft like 5 minutes and trying to craft the right album. So I don't know if that answers your question at all.
Well, it really does, because I've been about 5 years into it, and I don't even feel like I've got a good 20 yet. I've got. I can make the 15, 20, but I haven't concentrated because, I've got a real job and all that kind of stuff too. So I've got other things going on. But
I bet if that's how you feel, then I bet that your 15 is great. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, I feel like if you're going to be that critical of yourself and that hard on yourself about the 20, and then you're doing 20-minute sets sometimes, but you feel like you really have 15, then I bet that 15 is great, because otherwise you would just be bragging about doing 20 minutes.
Yeah. Yeah, no doubt.
I did just book somebody. I don't want to she was actually just at the drop, so I don't want to even say I was so proud of her this night, but I don't want to out her about it. And this is on me. This is something silly of me that I did I just really always liked watching her perform, and I'd seen her do so much different material at open mics when I was in Chicago that I figured that enough time had passed that in my own comedy clock, I just figured that in the time that's passed and I see her name on certain shows, I'm like, oh, she's probably doing a lot of 20-minute sets or has 20 minutes to do, And so I booked her to feature for me doing a 20-minute set. And on the way there, we also just wanted to have a chance to chat about comedy. And on the way there, I asked her, how much time she had, and she really had it broken down and really said she had I don't know, I feel like she felt confident in having maybe even less than, or you know what, maybe it was it was a really weird show of she had to do 22 minutes, and he was like, well, I figured I'd have this, and this, and that's 17, and then had a couple ideas of things to throw in there, and she had a great set. I mean, she did so good, so it's not me criticizing her, but I can't believe I didn't even check with her to be like, do you have 20 minutes? I just assumed she did.
Yeah.
And now she does. Now she can say, I've done 20, you don't know you do it until you do. And also she had so much material that she didn't even do that, I think that that's an art too of you're saying that you have 15 minutes. Yeah, maybe, but you don't really know, it's hard to know what a painting could look like if you had a bigger canvas,
Right.
How do you spread out the colors? And, it's hard to, until you have the practice of doing 20 minutes. That's why it's you don't want to do a 20-minute set before you have 20 minutes. But like, I think it's safe to try to like push yourself when you're almost there to fill that time, because that pressure is what's going to make you grow,
Right.
you know, and make you like scramble to write some stuff to fill that time.
Mm. Yeah, you got to feel a little uncomfortable up there when you're trying to get that 20 so that you know it's good when you got it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But, you know, that's why, like, you know, no offense to the drop, but the drop is the perfect room to do an experimental 20 in, you know?
Right.
Because, I mean, that's the first room I think it's not the first room I ever headlined. I think it's the first club I headlined. The first time I ever did 45, I had never done 45, and I wasn't expecting to that night at a bar that's now the Blue Room Comedy Club. It wasn't then at all. It was just the back of a bar. It's been converted and is now an amazing comedy club. It's probably like 3 times the size of the drop. Yeah, they're like, you're doing 45. And I was like, acted totally cool about it, but was absolutely freaking out and just cramming my notes. Like, oh gosh, I have to like 45. I don't know that I can do that.
Yeah.
And was it like a 45 that I'm exceptionally proud of and would record? No, but it was good. And, you know, I stretched out the parts that weren't there yet, and it at least gave me the confidence to be like, okay, I can hold down the stage for 45 minutes. And I don't feel bad about, you know, I'm not like embarrassed about anybody seeing me do that before I was ready, because that was me becoming ready.
Right.
Know?
Right. Yep. Definitely. I've got one last thing I want to ask you. What was it like doing Doug Loves Movies?
I was high.
Okay. I love that podcast, but I don't get high, so I don't get a lot of it. But it just cracks me up.
It's such a good podcast. I have to tell you, I don't listen to a ton of podcasts, and that's one of the ones that when I have listened to it, I'm like, oh, this is great. But I don't really listen to many podcasts, and so, but I love him, and I was so excited that I got asked to be on it. Then when I first got put to do it, I thought I was getting Doug with high. And I thought it was just going to be about, you know, 420 stuff. And I was like, perfect, I can talk about that. And then it was the movies one. And Doug Loves Movies I listened to it before, and I'd listened to it in the past, and I listened to it especially like before we recorded. And so like I knew like how it worked. I didn't realize what I was getting into, like how the fans like participate, what they participate at, and I didn't realize any of that. And I had a blast. I really had fun with like the gift bag thing that I put together, and I still have regrets because I got overwhelmed because everybody stands up and holds up their signs that they make, and you have to pick one to be the person you're playing for. And there were so many great signs. There was also this chick that I worked with at Grubhub, and it was in the crowd, and she was like saying my name, and I knew her from work a little bit. You know? So I was like, I felt like I had to pick her, even though honestly her sign was not that great. And I think everybody's reaction to me picking her was like, "Why would you pick that one? That's not a good one." And, I feel like I kind of let him down by picking somebody that, you know, like it worked. You know what I mean? But like the one person who knew me in the crowd, like she won. I was, like I said, we smoked right before. I don't ever smoke before I perform or do a podcast or anything like that. But, you know, with him, I'm not going to say no. So aside from being stoned, I also know over like just so little about movies.
Well, I think that's true. That's true of a lot of his guests. So I don't think you're alone in that. Yeah,
and I'm fine with that. You know, I try to be funny about being dumb. You know, Anyway, so it was a huge rush. It was very fun, very cool, and then I just hope I didn't let him down by making such a unappealing sign, but it was for personal reasons.
Yeah. Well, that's great. Well, Reena,
he asked me to come.
Go ahead.
But I wasn't in town, so hey, Doug, if you're listening, find me on the road. He won't, but.
Oh, that's great. Well, Reena, it was great talking to you. I think there was a lot of good information there, and I know you are in the middle of this exhaustive tour right now. And you just need some rest, I think. So I'm going to let you do that.
Well, I'm sorry I give that impression off, but it is accurate.
I read between the lines and some of the stuff. So I would like to tell folks.
I don't get to, but yeah.
Yeah.
I got to get ready for my show, but yeah, that'll be relaxing.
Yeah, no doubt. So folks, go to ReenaCalm.com to see where Reena is, and also check out Amazon because she's got her first book's out called Once Upon a Time, and I bet there's some puns in there.
Yep, it's a book of puns.
Yeah.
The website's being, I would have my current, that's how behind I am, is that, I have little trouble keeping up with things like that. But there is a website. I would say the best place to follow me for up-to-speed information would be Instagram right now.
Okay.
So at Reena Calm on Instagram, and yeah, definitely there's a link on my Instagram page to get the book too. If you like puns, it's holiday season, right? Great gift for someone who don't like. No, I'm just kidding.
That's great. Well, thanks a lot, Reena. I really appreciate you being on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me.